Scholastic Audio presents Wings of Fire, Book 3, The Hidden Kingdom, by Tui T. Sutherland, read by Shannon McManus. The Dragonette Prophecy. When the war has lasted 20 years, the Dragonettes will come. When the land is soaked in blood and tears, the Dragonettes will come. Find the sea wing egg of deepest blue. Wings of night shall come to you. The largest egg in mountain high will give to you the wings of sky. For wings of earth, search through the mud for an egg the color of dragon blood. And hidden alone from the rival queens, the sandwing egg awaits unseen. Of 3 queens who blister and blaze and burn, 2 shall die, and 1 shall learn. If she bows to a fate that is stronger and higher, she'll have the power of wings of fire. 5 eggs to hatch on brightest night, 5 dragons born to end the fight. Darkness will rise to bring the light. The Dragonettes are coming. Prologue. The 5 Dragonettes were fighting. Again. Bright scales in green and red and gold caught the rising sun as the young dragons darted between the rocks, claws and teeth flashing. 5 forked tongues hissed with fury. Beyond them, below the cliff, the sea crashed against the sand with a muffled rushing sound, as if it didn't want to compete with the shouts of the dragons. It was embarrassing, was what it was. Nautilus glanced up uneasily at the massive black dragon beside him. The Dragonettes were so busy yelling at one another that they hadn't even noticed him yet. Nautilus wished he could read Morrowseer's mind, the way Morrowseer was undoubtedly reading his. He also wished there were more Talons of Peace around, but when word spread that the Night Wing was coming, most of them suddenly found urgent missions elsewhere. The Peace Movement's hideout in the seaside cliffs was virtually deserted this morning. Occasionally, a dragon snout would emerge from one of the caves, spot Morrowseer, and instantly vanish again. The 5 Dragonettes were the only ones on top of the cliffs. Although there were several other young dragons living with the Talons of Peace, they'd all been whisked out of sight. But apparently no one had seen fit to warn the objects of Morrowseer's scrutiny that he was coming.
Put thoughts of foreign holidays on hold, and put Scotland's sunniest city in your sat-nav. Put ideas of adventure in your kids' heads, and culture and creativity on the to-do list. Put a host of great bars and restaurants on the menu, and put your good gear on to visit Britain's coolest little city. This year, put Dundee on your map and discover a world-class destination right on your doorstep. Visit Dundee.com for more information.
Or that they were going to be inspected. Well, Morrowseer said, they are energetic. They were just a backup plan, Nautilus said defensively. Nobody thought we'd need them, especially not all of them. We thought maybe 1 or 2 if something went wrong with the originals. We haven't spent a lot of time training them. I can see that. Morrowseer's dark eyes narrowed as Viper, the sandwing, fell into a crevice, and the mudwing promptly tripped and landed on top of her. With a hiss, Viper whipped around and bit Ochre's tail, setting off a yowling whine. Excuse me, Nautilus said. He could see where this was going. He stepped forward, cuffed Viper's ears, and snatched Squid, the little green sea wing, out of the way before the others could set his tail on fire. Stop this, he hissed. You are being watched. Flame, the red skywing dragonette, snapped his mouth shut and whipped his head around, scanning the twisted rocks of the sea cliff. Marosier stepped into the light of the sunrise and looked down his snout majestically. "I knew it!" crowed the little Nightwing dragonette. Fate Speaker leaped off a stone pillar, flapping her wings proudly. "I knew a Nightwing was coming to see us. Didn't I tell you guys this would happen?" "Did you?" Ochre scratched his large brown head. "No," said Viper. "Don't think so," piped up Squid from behind Nautilus's back. "Even if you did, you also predicted an earthquake, a new Talon of Peace, and that we'd have something besides seagulls for breakfast this week," said Flame. "And since none of those things have happened, you can see why we might have stopped listening." "Well, I knew," Fate Speaker said blithely. "I saw it with my powers, and I foresee that he brought us something great for breakfast. Didn't you?" She beamed up at Marosier. He blinked slowly. Nautilus. A word, please." "Can I come too?" the black dragonette asked, bouncing closer to Marosier. "I've never met another Nightwing before. Although, of course, I feel a very strong psychic connection with our whole tribe." "Stay here." Marosier pressed one claw into her chest and moved her back to the other dragonettes. She sat down and curled her tail around her talons with a huffing snort. Marosier stepped down the rocks, out of earshot. When he turned, he found Nautilus right behind him. But clinging to his tail was the sea-wing dragonette. Marosier gazed at Squid disapprovingly. "I can't leave him alone with them," Nautilus said apologetically. "Whenever I'm not watching, one of them bites him." "Or they all do," sniffed the small green dragon. Marosier flicked his tongue out and in, considering. "It is clear to me," said the enormous Nightwing after a moment, "that leaving the dragonettes of the prophecy in the care of the Talons of Peace was a mistake. Both the real ones and the false ones." "Who?" asked the dragonette. "Hush," said Nautilus, covering the dragonette's snout with one talon. He saw the look on Marosier's face and added hastily, "You remember, Squid, we taught you about the prophecy? You know the war that all the dragon tribes are fighting?" "The one you want to stop," Squid said, "because we're the good guys. We want peace." "Right," said Nautilus. "Basically, right. So the prophecy says that 5 dragonettes were hatched about 6 years ago. A sea-wing, a sky-wing, a mud-wing, a sand-wing, and a night-wing, who are going to end the war. They get to choose which sister should be the new sand-wing queen. Burn, blister, or blaze." "Oh," said Squid. "Hey, I hatched about 6 years ago." "Really?" said Marosier. "You're barely the size of a 3-year-old dragonette." "I have a big personality," Squid informed him, as if he had been told this enough times that he was certain everyone knew it. "And your friends are about 6 years old, too," Nautilus said quickly. "They're not my friends," Squid grumbled. "They're all bullies, except for Fate Speaker, who is plain crazy." Marosier glanced back at Fate Speaker, the Nightwing dragonette. She was sitting on top of a twisted stone column, leaning so far toward them that she looked in imminent danger of overbalancing and toppling off. "Well, Squid," Nautilus said, "what if you were one of the dragonettes in the prophecy? What would you think about that?" The sea-wing gave Marosier a canny look. "Would I get treasure?" "You'd get fame and power," said Marosier. "If you did what you were told, that is." "How about treasure?" Squid insisted. Marosier gave Nautilus an incredulous look. "Is this dragonette bargaining with me?" "I like treasure," Squid pointed out. "The Talons of Peace are so lame, because none of them have any treasure." "We gave up worldly things to fight for a higher cause," Nautilus said, Peace is more important than jewels or gold. Nah, said Squid. I'd rather have gold. Would you be willing to choose whichever Sandwing Queen we told you to? Marosier asked. If so, we could perhaps talk about gold. All right, Squid said, with a gleam in his eye. But I don't want Flame to be part of it. He has to stay here. Why? What's wrong with your Skywing? Marosier asked Nautilus. Nothing, Nautilus said. They're just having a fight today. And every day, Squid said, because he's mean. The Skywing is non-negotiable, said Marosier. You're non-negotiable, Squid said. Squid, be polite, said Nautilus tiredly. I foresee that I am going to regret this, said Marosier, frowning down at the sea wings. But I will be taking over the training of the Prophecy Dragonettes. They have been mishandled for too long. Obviously, they need clear guidance. What does that mean? Nautilus asked. A sense of dread was starting to creep across his scales. He glanced at Squid. Perhaps they should have chosen a different sea wing to be the fake dragonette of the prophecy. If Marosier hurts Squid, if anything happens to him, his mother is going to kill me, Nautilus thought. It means they're coming with me, Marosier said, with a flick of his tail. Where? Squid demanded. You'll find out when we get there, said Marosier. And if you know what's good for you, you'll stop asking nosy questions and do what you're told. I can do that, Squid said, but good luck with Flame and Viper. He thought for a moment. And Fate Speaker, for that matter. Wait, no, said Nautilus. He tried to fill his mind with noise so the Nightwing couldn't read his thoughts. You can't take them. Except for Fate Speaker, who came from you, all their parents are Talons. That's how we got their eggs in the first place. They won't want them to leave. Except Ochre, Squid offered. His mom won't care. It's a Mudwing thing. Shut up, said Marosier. He studied Nautilus with narrow black eyes. Don't think it. Don't think it. Don't think it. Nautilus repeated to himself. 3 moons, Marosier said with disgust. This dragonette is your son. Nautilus stared down at his claws. It had seemed like a good idea when the Talons first decided to have backup dragonettes. Squid hatched around the right time, if not exactly on the brightest night, and it meant that everyone in the movement treated the dragonette like the precious creature Nautilus knew he was. Of course I am, said Squid. Isn't that a funny coincidence? Wow, I'm the son of the leader of the Talons of Peace and a dragonette of destiny. He puffed out his chest. I'm even more important than I thought I was. He strutted off toward the other dragonettes, having forgotten, as he often did, that none of them liked hearing about how important he was, and that he would almost certainly end up with a singed snout before long. Nautilus watched him go, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Why had the Talons agreed to work with Marosier? Why had they decided to get involved with the prophecy in the first place? And how had they lost the real dragonettes? That was the question that drove him crazy. Kestrel, Dune, and Webbs should have been able to keep a handle on 5 dragonettes, especially when they were conveniently trapped in a secret cave. Instead, the 5 had escaped, then possibly killed Queen Scarlet of the Skywings, thrown the Sky Kingdom into upheaval, turned Queen Coral against her allies, wrecked the Seawing Palace, and disappeared once more into the wilds of Pyria. Worse yet, there was no one to punish. Kestrel and Dune were dead, while Webbs had wriggled away from the Talons and vanished. And who knew where the dragonettes were, or when they'd turn up again with their spectacular talent for trouble and chaos. Quite A coincidence. Marosir echoed Squid's remark, sounding rather unimpressed. Well, said Nautilus, I thought why not? Of course none of these 5 actually hatched on the brightest night, or else they'd be the real dragonets of the prophecy, wouldn't they? But they are about the right age, and nobody has to know the rest. Except anyone who was at their hatching, Marosir mused. It would be tidier if we could kill any witnesses. Nautilus blanched. Do their parents count as witnesses? He wondered, before he could squelch the thought. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Marosir said briskly. Since we can't be sure yet which of these we'll use and which we'll discard. He frowned at Fate's speaker, who was eagerly interrogating Squid. Nautilus felt properly faint now. Discard? He echoed. Marosir snorted. Very well. I'll try to bring yours back in one piece. He wrinkled his snout, looking as close to amused as Nautilus had ever seen him. But isn't peace the most important thing, Sea Wing? Don't you tell your Talons all the time that any sacrifice must be made to end this war? Yes, but the alternate dragonets were your idea in the first place. A good idea, as it turns out, since the real ones have proven to be so unsatisfactory. Marosir hissed softly. So we get rid of the most dangerous ones. I train their replacements myself. He smiled in a way that made Nautilus feel queasy, right down to his claws. And then, we make sure the prophecy is fulfilled the way it was supposed to be. Chapter 1. It had been raining for 5 days. Glory officially hated it. She also was not enjoying the comments from the other dragonets about how, as a rain wing, she should love this weather. She most certainly did not love this weather. In the caves under the mountain, the dragonets had never, ever been rained on. This downpour felt unnatural and unstoppable and horribly, unpleasantly wet. I don't care if a real rain wing is supposed to like this, she thought, as droplets rolled off her snout, seeped through her scales, and soaked her wings until they dragged heavily behind her. If they do, there's something wrong with them. No sensible dragon should enjoy weather that makes it so hard to fly. 3 moons. Please let them be sensible dragons. Let them be nothing like the stories. Everyone said rain wings were useless and lazy. But the tribe lived off by themselves in the rainforest, where no one ever saw them. So everyone might be wrong. Glory was really hoping they were wrong. She shook her whole body and glared at the fog-shrouded sky. What she wanted was more sun. She'd missed the sun her whole life and hadn't known it until it hit her scales the day they left the caves. More long sunny days would be fine by her. Instead, there was this. Rain, mud, more rain, more mud. Plus one moaning, groaning, dripping slowpoke of a wounded sea wing. Can we stop? Webbs gasped. I need to rest. He floundered through the mud to a slightly drier spot under a tree. Glory narrowed her eyes at him as the blue-green dragon flopped to the ground. The other dragonets stopped too, exchanging glances. They were walking today instead of flying, because Webbs said it was easier on his injury. And yet he still asked to stop nearly every 10 steps. Glory was starting to suspect he didn't really want them to get to the rainforest. But why? She wondered. Is he hiding something? Does it have to do with my parents? As the guardian who had stolen her from the Rain Wing tribe in the first place, Webbs should have been a helpful fount of knowledge about where she came from. Instead, he got all mumbly and forgetful whenever they asked about the rainforest dragons. Clay paced over to Webbs and peered down at his wound. They'd wrapped it with seaweed soaked in ocean water for as long as they could, but now they were too far inland to get any more. The poisoned scratch near Webb's tail had become an ugly gash, surrounded by blackened scales, and the black seemed to spread a bit more each day. None of them had any idea what to do to combat sandwing poison. Not to mention, we have no idea why Blister wanted Webbs dead so badly. I mean, I think he's awful, but she doesn't even know him. Glory glanced at Starflight, the black Nightwing who was the smartest dragonette she knew, and probably still would be even if she knew more than 4 dragons. She wondered if he had any theories about Blister and Webbs. Clay swept his tail through the mud, looking worried. "I hope the Rain Wings can help him," he said. "This isn't exactly like their venom, but maybe they'll have more ideas than we do." Glory shook out her wings and looked away. She didn't care. The other dragonettes felt some kind of misguided loyalty to their old guardian, as if it was their responsibility to save him. She was the only one who seemed to remember how he'd been willing to stand by and let someone kill her. Stealing her egg had been his idea too. The prophecy called for a Skywing, but when the Talons lost their Skywing egg before it hatched, Webbs had decided to replace it with a Rainwing. It was his fault Glory had been forced to grow up under the mountain, far from her home and family, learning about a prophecy that didn't even have a place for her in it. It was easy for the others. There was no question about their destiny. But Glory, if she was meant to help save the world, then why hadn't the prophecy called for a Rainwing? And if she wasn't necessary for this big, grand destiny, then what was the point of her life at all? Maybe it was all one big mistake. But when she thought like that, she ended up having violent dreams about ripping Webbs apart. So, better not to think about it. Destiny would have to sort itself out. Right now, she was going home. The branch above Glory suddenly dipped and dumped a lake's worth of water onto her head. She leaped back with a hiss and glared up into the tree. "Shh," Tsunami said from above. She dropped down to the ground and peered around at the gloomy swamp. "There's a pair of mudwings headed this way, but they'll never see us in this weather." Rolls of thick gray fog hung over the mud, wreathing the stunted trees like smoke around a dragon's horns. It was hard to tell what time of day it was. The sky was gray in every direction, and the rain drizzled down unrelentingly. Glory agreed with Tsunami. A dragon could barely see her own wingtips in this, let alone another dragon. "We should still hide," Starflight said anxiously. "We're only a day's flight from Queen Morin's palace right now. If we get caught—" "More prison," Clay said with a sigh. Every queen they'd met so far seemed determined to keep the dragonettes trapped under her claws. They'd escaped Queen Scarlet's prison in the Sky Kingdom only because of Glory's venom, a secret weapon even she hadn't known about until she'd needed it. She touched her forked tongue to her fangs and glanced at the sky. They still had no idea if Queen Scarlet had survived Glory's attack. Given their luck, Glory was pretty sure Scarlet was alive and planning some horrible revenge. After that escape, they'd gone looking for safety with Tsunami's mother, Queen Coral of the Sea Wings. Of course, Coral had decided to lock them up as well. Glory hadn't been surprised. Not even family could be trusted when it came to the prophecy. Everyone had their own plans for how this war should end. So if Queen Morhen of the Mudwings found them in her territory, she probably wasn't going to give them tea and send them on their way. The Mudwing Queen held court beside a large lake on the southern edge of the Mud Kingdom. Glory remembered the map of Pyria, and a shiver of realization ran down her spine. If Starflight was right, and they were only a day's flight from there, then they must be only a day's flight from the rainforest as well. From the rainforest. And Glory's tribe. And then I'll belong somewhere. The Rainwings won't care that I'm not in some prophecy. "Glory," Tsunami scolded. "Bright yellow scales are the one thing they might see. Go back to camouflage." Glory glanced down and saw the starbursts of gold that had appeared all across her scales. Those meant happiness or excitement, as far as she knew, since she'd seen them pretty rarely in her life. It drove her crazy when her scales changed color without her telling them to. They did that way too often. She had to squash every big emotion before it splashed all over her. She concentrated on the steady drip-drip of the swamp around them, staring down at the thick brown mud oozing through her claws. She imagined the fog winding around her wings, slipping into the cracks in her scales, and spreading like gray clouds rolling across the sky. "And she's gone," Tsunami said. "She's still there," Sunny piped up. She edged closer to Glory and bumped into one of her wings. "See? Right there." She stretched out a talon, but Glory moved out of reach. Sunny felt around in the air for a moment, and then gave up. The little sandwing had been unusually quiet for the last few days. Glory guessed Sunny hated the rain too. The desert dragons were designed for searing heat, blazing sun, and endless clear sky days. Even an odd-looking sandwing like Sunny still had the instincts of her tribe. Really, Clay was the only one happy about the weather. Only a mudwing could appreciate the squishing and squashing under their claws as they traveled through the swamp. Starflight swiveled his head suddenly. "I think I smell someone coming," he whispered. He shuddered from horns to claws. "Don't panic," Tsunami whispered back. "Clay, you hide me and Sunny. Starflight, find a shadow and do your invisible petrified nightwing thing. Glory, you can shield webs." "No thanks," Glory said immediately. She wasn't going anywhere near webs, certainly not to save his life. "I'll take Sunny." She didn't like touching other dragons, but Sunny was better than webs. "But," Tsunami started, stamping her foot. Glory ignored her. She lifted one wing and tugged the little gold dragon in close to her side. When she lowered her wing again, Sunny was hidden by Glory's gray-brown camouflage. "Yikes," Clay said. "That was so weird. Like Sunny just got eaten by the fog." His stomach grumbled woefully at the word eaten, and the mudwing shuffled his big feet in embarrassment. Starflight peered at the spot where Sunny had just been, twisting his claws in the mud. "She's fine," Glory said. "Go follow orders like a good dragonette, or Tsunami might fling you to the eels." Tsunami